In this tutorial we will assemble some content in order to create a base package. We will also take advantage of this exercise to look at various tools that are used within the IMF mastering environment. So first of all, what is mastering really? Mastering is the process of assembling content in a specific way to create distribution versions or archives if you are in that business. And just like with all the other processes that are often found in the post-production environments, when you master content for IMF, one of the things that you want to have a look at is, of course, how does the audio look like? Do we have actual waveforms? Can we actually play back that content? And potentially also if we can listen to the audio content as well here. So once we have this done, we can actually move to the next step and start the packaging. Now before we do that, I should drag your attention here onto the timeline again and see that we have something that's not quite IMF compliant, in the sense that this section of the content is actually not having any audio associated with it. Of course, we could add some audio here, but let's not do it on purpose and see what happens. So what will happen here is that the mastering tool will actually provide some silence for the missing channels here. First of all, the content is provided as UHD, HDR, HLG, and because of that, because it's HDR, we need to prepare the timeline or the composition in such a way that the IMF package that we will be create from it will carry the necessary metadata. Now this is a very, very important part of the mastering process. The mastering process is not just assembling the content in a way that looks more or less presentable and encoding. Mastering is about creating the content in a form that can be used later on for various operations such as transcoding, for creating distribution or streaming files for OTT platforms. The mastering display contains the properties that define the color environment that's been used to create this content. So let's go into the composition settings here and see what we have. And by default it's set on a P3 D6048 nits, which clearly doesn't work for us. And in this case we will select the ITU BT2100 HLG at 1000 nits, which is the actual parameters that were used for this content. So besides the selection of the HDR standard here, we also have a display here for the CIE diagram that shows us what color gamut is being used. The next thing that we might want to check is also the color management mode here. And in the color management mode here we supplied 3 different methods for handling color. The native methods, ACES, which is a color system that is using different components to achieve automatic color conversion, and MTCMS, which is our own color engine here. In this particular case I will not use any of these later two, but rather stay with the native mode, because that's how the content was provided to me in HLG, so I don't need to make any specific changes to it. I will also ignore here the save gamut and text color space. These are for handling subtitles. I will not carry any HDR statistics at this point, and of course I'm not going to handle any dynamic tone mapping, but if you need to handle things like Dolby Vision or HDR10+, this is where you need to set them. So let's exit now. And we have our basic settings attached to our composition, and now we can move on onto the actual IMF export tool. So let's click on the IMF export tool, and again we have a bunch of tabs here that we can access for various uses, of course, and the general tab shows us the name, allows us to apparently pick a specification or an application type, and then we can set some other parameters that we want to use for our package. We have a list here of applications. So of course here we have things like application 2E, application 4, 5, TSP 2121, and so on. Some of them are grayed out. That's because they're not compatible with the current composition that we have in our project. And what we want to use here, it's the TSP 2121, which is the DPP Apple ProRes specification. So if we select that, as we move into the video tab, then we have a bunch of parameters that we can fill in here, like the codec has been set on ProRes, and then we have a choice of profiles here. We also have here a possibility to encode as 422 or 444, and a bunch of compatible color spaces here. Now, all this is good, but in general, that's a lot of complexity for most users. So if I switch back to general, a better way to do this is to use the specification. So the specification is essentially a list of predefined templates for deliverables, and those are based on the IMF delivery schema, which is work that's been done by the IMF user group. So if you want more information on this, please contact the IMF user group when you wish, and they will provide the necessary information. But essentially, the IMF delivery schema is a way to translate the delivery specifications that are usually provided as a PDF or a Word document into an XML that a computer can understand, and in this case present as a list of presets. We will ignore the content versions for this, and we'll switch to the sidecar element. So the sidecar is the ability to convey together with the content some extra elements that are not part of the main presentation. So in order to add some elements in the sidecar, I'll just click here on the button, and I'll navigate to our folder here, and I have a poster that goes with this content, and we will add the poster here into the package as well. Jumping further, I'll ignore all the other details. I'll just go straight to the output and select the actual place where we want to generate our package here. And in this case, we will have the full package that we want to generate, and then we'll press Make IMF, and the actual encoding and rewrapping starts. In the second part of this tutorial, we'll reuse the original version that we have created before, and we will, just like before, delete these tracks as well, re-enable those channels that we logged before, and see what we have. And now we have the same piece of content like before, but with a different opening here. The next step, of course, will be just like before. We'll go to the IMF Export Tool. In this case, we'll export the VF, and we will process this using the BBC Library Master option. I'll skip the metadata changes here for you and go straight to the output. And in this case, we will select the differential package type, which will create only a supplemental package containing the new elements without the previous ones being incorporated. We will put that into our folder here as well, and just like before, we'll press the Make IMF, which will simply encode this time the new element, and of course all the other elements will be referenced only, and no duplicate files will be found in these new packages. As you can see, this is really that simple, and now you have two different versions that you can distribute and use for other purposes such as transcoding, archiving, and so on. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully this was meaningful to you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you.